Pati TikTok na bro, patola na ito. No, we need to go strong on TikTok, bro. Okay. Let's do this. So around, 15-20 minutes each episode, we can keep it short. Yung parang Ronaldo style. Don't worry about it. Because alam ko you want to jiu-jitsu or something later. Alright, eto na! Bumalik na ang Ricardo.
Finally.
Ricardo and Lisandro.
Ang hirap bumalik, pero ang saya bumalik.
Kamusta bro? What happened sa Pilipinas? We missed you. Literally, kami ni Ronaldo.
Nasa beach.
Ayan tayo.
Nasa Bali. Yung mga bakasyon. Alam mo ko naman pagkasal. Kaya
Ayan talaga.
bakasyon sa both sides ng pamilya. Nagbabakasyon, minsan walang internet or minsan sobrang bagal. Pero happy naman. Ngayon nakabalik na rin ako dito sa Berkeley, which is extremely rainy. So from the heat of Philippine beaches to the rainy, not so cold, the rainy cold of the Bay Area.
Alright, so hobby duties. Okay, mga hobby duties. Ganun talaga. Don't worry bro, we're not gonna hold it against you kasi babawi ka talaga ngayon ng big time.
Babawi ako.
Talaga, I'm gonna juice you out. Don't worry. We're not gonna make the episodes 3-hour long like before. Medyo nagets namin na the audience for that is not as big as I thought. But okay lang. Nakita mo naman.
Mataas pa rin.
Mataas pa rin, but
Is lumabas yung ranking natin ng Richard A. Darren show sa Spotify at saka sa Apple. Hindi pa ako nakakabalik. So, hindi pa ako formally nakaka-congratulate sa'yo. So, formally, congratulations, bro, for being the #1 political podcast in the Philippines.
well, I would say together with Christian Esguerra. I would put it that way. Para alam naman ako, I believe in competition. But I was very proud kasi dun sa Spotify, medyo mahirap ang kalaban mo. Yung mga kalaban mo dyan sa top 100, yung mga tipong yung mga Vice Ganda stuff, Barangay Love stuff, not to mention pati mga Jordan Peterson International. Kasama rin.
Tayo lang ang hindi produced na podcast.
Yes, yun.
Diba?
Kachipangan, no?
Parang gigising, ng kape.
Wala, puro eye bags. Ay, eye bags na. Don't proud ako, bro. I mean, 100%. Thank you so much for that. Then I would say, okay, I think we're #1 non-production podcast. Ayan naman tayo. No, but let me be very honest. Thanks to collaborations with you, Ronaldo, Mark, I mean, I think this was really the big part. In fact, I can say personally, among the best episodes we did in the year 2023, which was a big year for our podcast, was the ones I did with you, with Ronald, Mark, and then yung tatlo, the RRM and RRL did very, very well, bro. Very, very well. So,
mga special. Sana makabalik tayo doon.
So I think that means people like that. Yung medyo bardagulan na dalawa-tatlo tayo nagbabardagulan. But you know naman, bro, may audience din tayo, very important audience. Yung nexus natin, yung medyo ilustrado, feeling pretentious version natin, which is where we're gonna start today, right? Let's get back to that.
Speaking of ilustrado, no? Speaking of ilustrado, kasi nga saan ba nanggaling ang mga ilustrado kung hindi dahil sa impluwensya ng mga pare gaya ni Jose Burgos at ni Papa Pelaez.
Papa P. Oh, man, Papa Pelaez. Yes. Okay, let me first start. Obviously, nakita ko doon sa mga interventions and posts mo about GOMBURZA. Were you emotionally, like hit by it? I mean, like, what was the first of all? Can you talk about the movie per se? Yeah, first.
I mean, grabe kasi una-una sasabihin ko atinista ako. So yung version ng history na linalagay sa film is usually, medyo oversimplification to. Medyo UP style palaban, mapagera. And slightly at times, di ko din na lahat, slightly at times focus on ethnicity. And that's why I had problems with Luna because it was that kind of old school. Now the UP History Department is no longer like this,
Yeah.
Pero merong certain stream of the UP History Department na parang old school palaban na Agoncillo, sabihin na natin, okay, wag na natin lahatin UP History Department, sabihin na natin Teodoro Agoncillo School na medyo palaban, medyo militant, na yun yung lumabas sa Luna. Remember, Teodoro Agoncillo believed that anybody who collaborated with the Americans deserved to be shot. Anybody who was negotiating deserved to be shot. Sinabi niya yun sa mga libro niya. And then, klaseng uncompromising history that you see si in Luna. Now, as an Atenista, mas moderate kami lagi. We believed in thinkers, we believed in people who were
Right.
moderate, we believed in liberals, and we taught, of course, the history of the church. And for the first time, I saw a very Ateneo movie, historiographical approach, put on film. Now, it's very obvious bakit siya Atenista kasi, of course, Jescom yung gumawa. Literally,
Right.
Ateneo talagang gumawa nito. And it's based on the work not of Teodoro Agoncillo but on the work of John Schumacher, who for me, and lumalabas lang Ateneo liberal bias ko dito, is leagues better than Teodoro Agoncillo. Si John Schumacher for me was the greatest Filipino, and I might add, Filipino historian of the 20th century, because Father Jack was of course a Filipino citizen.
Right.
That's the other thing I want to say about GOMBURZA. It returns us to the fact that Filipino is not a race. And Filipino
Right.
is an identification with a particular place. That's what, I think yun yung isa sa mga pinaka-important lessons ng GOMBURZA. Kaya ako tinamaan there on a very intellectual level. Yung last, I love the movie. It's my favorite historical movie of all time. I do think though that they should have gotten rid of that last scene, yung cheesy scene, yung papakita mo yung mga katipunero na mukhang nakalinggo ng wika costume. Parang masyado ng overwrought at masyado ng literal na parang
Wait lang, was Rizal really there? Parang child abuse yun.
Yung mga katipunero.
But bro, I mean, was Rizal really there? Parang child abuse yun. Wala, diba? That's like a imagination na yung part na yun, diba? Ano ba yung nangyari?
This is how I would have ended the film actually, bro. I don't, di naman ako director. Pero, imagine ko, for example, gagawa ka ng MCU-style tag scene. It doesn't need to be after the credits, but just sa hirit. Huwag mong ipapakita si Pepe Rizal the entire time. Huwag mo siyang pakita until yung last scene. And then you create a last scene whereby nasa Kalamba ka, tapos nandun si Pasiano, and then Rizal goes, Kuya, tinanggap ako sa Ateneo. And then Pasiano goes, maganda yan, Pepe. And then Pepe goes, ipapadala ko na pangalan ko sa kanila dahil tanggap na ako. Tapos sabi ni Pasiano, Pepe, wag mong gamitin ang pangalan na Jose Rizal Mercado sa Ateneo. Tapos sabi ni Rizal, bakit? Tapos sabi ni Pasiano, well, kasi Pepe, yung pangalan ng Mercado, mainit na yan dahil sa akin, malapit kasi kay Burgos. So, kuya, anong pangalan ang gagamitin ko? Sasabi ni Pepe, sasabi ni Pasiano, Jose Rizal, Pepe. Jose
Right.
Rizal. Cut. Because
Or,
one of the...
yeah, but you could start the movie that way and then end it with the part when he says it should be Rizal. Like parang that's the explanation. You could also make it that way, di ba?
Because one of...
Oo.
Kasi si Pasiano, when he was in Ateneo, it was Pasiano Rizal Mercado.
Right.
There is some debate as to why they dropped the Mercado, but according to Rizal himself sa letters, and some historians actually disagree with Rizal, but anyway, it's important that Rizal thought this. According to Rizal's letters, the reason why they dropped Mercado was because the name Mercado was already tied with Burgos and was therefore mainit na. So kaya siya naging Jose Rizal.
Na-red tag na yan. Yeah.
Na-rentag na yung pangalan ng Mercado. Kaya naging Rizal.
Exactly,
So, it's a kind of powerful statement, and hindi mo na kailang i-shoehorn na nandun si Rizal, nandun si Pepe, tapos yung yung buhok pa ni Pepe, di ba? Yung kulot na side part, when he was like 11, my God, yung buhok ni Rizal ganun na when he was 11 until he was in his 30s. Grabe naman, masyado namang hard sell.
Consistency.
So I loved everything about the movie, except
Yeah.
I thought the ending was really hard sell, man. But I'm
But
speaking
the
here-
ending, I think okay. I feel hurt by what you said. I completely agree with you, but I feel hurt because for me, I think that was the most powerful one. But honestly, it's because I was already affected by how Nick Joaquin described the final scenes and all of that. Kung dun sa Question of Heroes, the way Nick Joaquin narrated it was very, very powerful. So when I watched the movie, it brought back the memories of reading Nick Joaquin's dun sa final scene, nung patay na siya, people drop to their knees. I think the way Nick Joaquin described it, that left a very kind of a long impression on me. But I like how you put it, na parang ikwento ni Pasiano kay Rizal, why he shouldn't use Rizal, and then the whole story comes, and then obviously that means they'll have to also remove the first part where they were talking about Pule and and then sa end kaya pumili ka ng Rizal, so essentially the struggle continues. I mean, definitely you can slice this in different ways.
So interesting yung insertion ng Pule dun because
Yeah.
there were two proto-nationalist revolts prior to Burgos.
El Conde,
There,
Novales, yeah.
No, there was Pule,
Mhm.
and then there was the Novales Revolt.
Yes,
I think
Novales,
Novales
yeah,
Revolt,
yeah.
1820s yung Novales Revolt.
Yeah.
You could argue that the Novales Revolt was actually more important than the Pule Revolt. Why? Because yung kay Pule naman, it was largely a debate within the church. Pule wanted to become a friar, but he was denied, right? So nagkaroon siya ng revolution. See, Novales is more interesting because Andres Novales was a Mexican Creole living in the Philippines. He was a captain. And nung sinabi na independent na when Mexico gained its independence, Novales made the argument that since the Philippines was governed out of Mexico, the Philippines should be independent from Spain also. So Novales launched a revolt and declared himself the Emperor of the Philippines dahil naniniwala siya na bahagi ang Pilipinas ng Mexico. So in many ways, yan ang first revolt mo to free the Philippines from Spain, not the Pule Revolt.
And
Now,
that creates a perfect continuity, not only with, of course, the Criollo revolts dun sa Mexico and then later Simon Bolivar, but also with Palaez. Because I mean, I was just looking at the pictures of
with also
Palaez.
Pelaez.
He looks
Pero,
he looks white.
pero
I mean, if I could put it that way, he looks white. I mean, he could pass easily as a white man.
Yun
Yeah.
nga yung, parang sa tingin ko, alam ko yung ginagawa ng scene dun eh. Parang sinusoften niya yung blow. And what's the blow there? The blow there is that these people are white. Di ba? So, i-connect mo na lang siya kay Pule, who was an Indio, para you make it seem as if actually, no, it's not as white as it seems. And then you cast Piolo Pascual as Pelaez. Pelaez was white, like 100%
Yes, like
white.
totally white. You can see the
Piolo
pictures.
at all.
Yeah.
Si Burgos did not could have looked a little bit like Cedric Juan, pero si Burgos, ang nanay, ang sa mother side, ang mother niya, half Criollo, half Indio, yung tatay niya puti.
Gorda Civil.
Ang
Yeah.
itsura ni Burgos puti talaga.
Yeah.
Mas puti pa tingnan niya kaysa sa Ayala.
Right.
So,
more Jazza siguro at medyo around. Hindi. Sila Jazza more like Moorish pa eh. Ito, nakita ko yung pictures ni Burgos, more parang, parang more to the north eh. More northern European yung, yeah.
So, grabe. So, kung pag-isipan mong gano'n, di ba? Hindi pa ata tayong handa sa gano'n. Handa na ba tayo bilang isang bayan na makita natin na some of our founding fathers were white? Handa pa ba? Handa tayo. Yung Ateneo nga, yung Ateneo nga hindi pa handa dyan. Isipin mo yung Ateneo. Meron silang, anong tawag nila sa award nila for cultural workers? Ang tawag nila doon, gawad tanglaw ng lahi. Ibig sabihin, Ateneo mismo, naniniwala na ang Pilipino ay lahi.
Yeah.
Hindi siya lahi, di ba? Paano naging lahi yan kung yung mga bayani mo, mga puti, kagaya ni Pelaez at saka ni Burgos? Hindi talaga yan lahi.
Unless we're more Latino about it and embrace the idea of being a Colombiano or being a Mexicano doesn't mean you're like this color or that color. You could be like, I don't know, look like those guys in telenovelas who look completely Spanish, or you can look like some of these Hollywood Mexican actors who look like Pinoys, right? So I don't know. I think maybe we should go back to that.
Ano ba talagang Pilipino sa kanila? I mean, minabasa akong quote from Pelaez eh. Sabi niya, ano bang problema niyo sa amin hindi kumakain ng tinapay kundi kumakain ng kanin?
Right.
That's interesting. So hindi kulay ng balat kundi kaming kumakain, we who eat rice.
Cultural practices, yeah.
Cultural practice. So yung mga Peninsulares kumakain ng tinapay,
Yeah.
yung mga Criollo at saka yung mga Indio, lahat ng mga tao na magiging Pilipino kumakain ng kanin.
Right.
So these are very interesting quotes that reveal to us what really Filipino is, kumakain ng kanin.
That's a very important
The one quote from Jose Rizal naman is, some of us are Creole. Yung favorite line ko from Rizal, some of us are Creole, some of us are Malayan, some of us are Chinese, but we all call ourselves Filipino. So,
anong letter
what does
yan?
that say?
Saan yan? I'm pinded out. Please forward mo sa akin pag nahanap mo na yan. I think that's a very important one. So, going back to this, I have two...
Mag-google mo lang. Google mo yun. We call ourselves Filipino.
We call
Nasa
yeah.
libro ko yan. So, kung gusto mo i-check yung citation.
Yun nga. So going back to this, the omission of Novales maybe was deliberate way of softening the blow, maybe as you put it. But at the same time, this goes back to what you call the Diliman consensus, diba? Which is this idea of the true revolutionary is a Bonifacio na, I don't know, mukhang Tagalog, mukhang quote-unquote Indio, using violence. I mean, it was not only yeah, I mean, it was even Constantino was again, aside from Agoncillo, was very harsh on him. No, I mean, he said Rizal repudiated the one act which really synthesized our national aspiration, and yet we consider him a national leader. I mean, essentially, they're saying he's a counter-revolutionary because at that last moment, hindi na sinuport si Bonifacio. Although there are a ton of reasons why he didn't do that, aside from not being revolutionary enough. So, I mean, do you think that may kasalanan talaga ang UP dito na in terms of racializing a very
Hindi
cosmopolitan,
lang
yeah,
visualizing,
and
actually.
classism also. There's a Marxist classist also element, right? Na parang dapat working class yung revolutionary, diba? Yung parang it should be kind of a more like a, I don't know, Ho Chi Minh, or
Yung
like
kind of yung kind of yes or no history, yung parang kakampihan, hindi kakampihan, revolutionary yan, hindi revolutionary yan. Or ito, napakasimple. Yung binary ng General Luna, di ba? Bayan o sarili. Either or. Everything is an either
right,
or in this
right,
kind
right,
of
right.
historiography.
False
So I
binary.
think it's about time to live in yung gray areas where being a Filipino is a process of constant negotiation.
Which is important because when I interviewed si Pepe Joke, no, he said that before making this movie, he was going around Italy and all of that, and he was talking to Italians, and how the Italy as we know today is not a direct continuation of the Roman Empire. A lot happened until only around 150 years. Actually, parang
Yeah.
kapanahon, no, ni Rizal, yung mga founding fathers
Yes.
of today's
Yes.
Italy.
Yung sabi niya, di ba, yung
Exactly.
Italians are made. Italians are made.
It's a project. It's a nationalist project, and as people who know Italy know that if you're Siciliano, you're very different from someone from Lombardy region in the north. I mean, even features are very very different. From south of Italy all the way to north. I mean, the joke I had some friends from north who told me, "Oh, we're more Austrian," diba? And the culture is very different.
They're Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. That's their joke, diba? We're more like Austrian. We're almost German, right? And then of course the South, they say, well, they make racial joke that they're almost like from Middle East or something like that, diba? So I thought that was very very helpful. So speaking of national project, to what degree do you think this movie was important in contributing to a proper discourse on that level? Because at the end of the day, aminin natin, you want a movie that appeals to the public, so you need some cheesy part, as you put it. For me, at least to make it to make commercial sense and make it appealing. And I'm glad na 4 weeks na tuloy-tuloy pa rin ito sa mga malalaking cinema, and many were ashamed to show it. But it's also about among us, the so-called intelligentsia, right, or self-described intelligentsia. We have to be shocked into having proper discourse on this and not be satisfied with what we inherited, right? I mean, how do you see that, Leloy?
I think part naman siya ng progress natin. Like, to be fair, yung old school, what I call Diliman Consensus, the Agoncillo, Constantino school, konti na lang naman din yung naniniwala dyan. It's largely, the boomers who were raised on that.
Yeah.
Kasi, 60s and 70s yun eh. The question of revolutionary/counter-revolutionary was very uso.
Yeah.
And then feel ko baka yung last breath na nun was yung General Luna. So hopefully we're moving on na talaga. So, talagang pinupuruan ko talaga yung General Luna. No, I really don't like General Luna. Like I'm on the record saying that that helped create Duterte. So dapat talagang puruhan yung sining yun. So hopefully we as a community are moving on and looking at the gray areas in Philippine history, and that's sort of what this film is doing. May isa pang scene na medyo ganito na ginagamit ko rin sa classic ko, yung ganito kami noon, paano kayo ngayon, na napaka-fluid din ng discussion of what Filipino is, and it's one of the few films na hindi overacting si Christopher De Leon. So panoorin.
That's a good way of putting it. I love it, bro. Next episode, so I want to keep it short, not go too much about it. I want to just go back a little bit to Rizal and some of the discussions you had with some of the historians. Nakisawsaw na ako about emphasis on Schumacher, and we had some discussion about Benedict Anderson. I know it will be a little bit historiographical, but I think you're the best person to talk to. So shortly, balikan natin yung question of Rizal, Bonifacio. What is a true revolutionary? Who's really the first Filipino? I think we touched on those things, but I want to go deeper into that. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Lisandro Claudio, joining us from UC Berkeley. I'm just saying that, Lelo, kasi mga iba na bagong audience, hindi nila alam yung boses mo. So I have to just spell it out.
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right, fantastic. It's almost 1 a.m. here, but we have friends joining us over TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. That's how interesting the discussion in the previous episode was. We talked about the movie Gomburza, Pepe Jokto's movie Gomburza. Let's just say right off the bat, it looks like my major disagreements kami ni Leloy, kasi for me, as a movie, I think the final scenes were very important. But I explained that a lot of that was also because I was influenced by Nick Joaquin's explanation of last moments of Burgos. I just felt that was important in a sense of, you know, it's a movie after all. But I understand as a
Gusto ko
historian.
yung last movement si Burgos. Ayoko na pinakita si Rizal.
Ah, okay, okay. Sorry, sorry. Yes, okay. Then we don't have a disagreement. Okay, okay. Sorry. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yes, ako for me, it's more like, wait lang, parang child abuse yan. If you know, like, what are you implying? You won't bring a what, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid to watch people being garroted. I mean, that's a bit too crazy for me. But you're right, also about yung naka-costume sila, magtitinikling na ba sila? I mean, I get what you were saying about that. You know, sana we just kept it at super, you know, the darkness of it should really shock us into,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Yes,
into
yes, yes, oh.
historical consciousness. I really appreciate that. Personally, Cedric is fantastic. I mean, all actors were fantastic. I found the Enchong D one really,
Oh, wow.
really
Ang
like,
galing ni Enchong D. Actually, si
wow,
Enchong
like,
D yung
wow.
pinakamaganda na actor for me doon. Si
No, no,
Enchong.
again, Cedric was fantastic. I'm just saying, given the role that he was playing, like, he brought to life yung nangyari kay Zamora. Kasi, kaya nga sabi ko, it speaks to me. Kasi, you know, kakatapos ko lang mag-review at magbasa ng mga libro ni Patricia Evangelista, you know, about EJK, about the weaponization of the legal process. So I think the Zamora example, it just brings to home this fact na how crazy our legal systems can be. That a person who just made a joke about, you know, bala and barel in the context of, you know, sugal, will be just dragged in because of affiliation. And let's be honest, that's kind of like the non-laban situation we had under Digong, di ba?
Yeah.
For me, that was the other thing that was very pulsating about the movie. Yung just the inanity of the judicial process that especially Zamora's case was really crazy. It was really crazy. Bumalik na rin ulit tayo sa movie, but sige, I think that's a good way of starting this discussion still, yeah.
What do you want to talk about ba? Kasi ako, I wanted to talk about 1872. Ano ba talaga yung relevance
Yes.
ng year na yun?
1872 to
Why are we so
1972.
focused on 1872?
Yeah.
And actually, a good way to think about, and I've been pushing this, medyo creative, but to compare 1872 to 1972, these are 2 years of the worst repressions in Philippine history, both 72s. 1872 is the Juez de Cuchillo, wherein the Spanish government tried to practically end the secularization movement of the priests
Izquierdo,
that were
yeah.
considered the most radical at the time. And then, of course, and then yung liberal movement, of course. And then, 1972, this is Marcos trying to crush a kind of what he felt was a conspiracy between the liberals and the communists. And I suspect that in both instances, yung mga movements that were organizing against the government or were critical of the government were driven underground. In 1872, some of them were also driven into exile. But same thing sa 1972, driven into
Right.
exile. So it's nice to think about those two years in conjunction with each other. Yung 1872 is interesting. Bakit ba ang obsessed ng Spanish government with priests, in
Right,
particular Creole priests? The very simple answer, and
Mexico?
pinakita ko sa Gumburza ng
Mexico?
konti.
Mm.
Ha?
Well, the precedence of Mexico wasn't the,
The presidents of Mexico, 'di ba? In fact, yung mga revolusyonaryo na pare sa Mexico, parang mas radikal sila
Right,
kaysa
right.
sa mga revolusyonaryo sa Pilipinas. These were people who were openly flaunting Spanish laws and were
Right.
people who were actively advocating for armed revolution and armed rebellion. That would happen much later sa Pilipinas. You would
Right.
have secular clergy sa Pilipinas na supportive ng Katipunan. And in fact, the reason why many people supported the Katipunan, mga masa, ay dahil yung mga parish priest nila naniniwala sa Katipunan.
Right.
So eventually, naging ganun din yung proseso sa Pilipinas. Pero nung time na to, what the Spanish government was trying to do is nakita nila yung nangyari sa Mexico, ayaw nila maulit sa Pilipinas. And when
Right.
they saw Pelaez, when they saw Burgos, ang nakita nila doon ay mga para na-remind sila, naalala nila yung mga Mexican radicals. So they said they wanted to forestall that movement. And it's very interesting, you know what happens after 1872? Apparently, UST stops, as I was reading about this, stops offering a PhD for priests.
interest. Because canon PhD in canonic law yata si di ba? O si Burgos,
Tinigil nila after 1872.
Yeah.
Meaning takot na talaga na magkaroon
Right.
ng isa pang Burgos. And that's why yung mga intellectuals mo, they're no longer priests. They are now people in exile. So,
Correct.
di ba, tignan mo yung trajectory. Yung mga radical mo, sina Burgos, sina Pelaez, homegrown, UST, pare. nung tinigil yon, you couldn't become a homegrown priest intellectual anymore. The way you became a critical intellectual or an ilustrado was mostly nag-abroad ka para kang Rizal.
Right,
So,
right.
yun yung two movements.
So connected. So what are you saying? Because essentially, this secular friars were like, well, they were like judicial experts. They were a kind of a lawyer, right? In a sense, right? I mean,
Tsaka sobrang galing nila dahil and this is what the people forget. Magaling ang UST nung panahon na yun.
oy,
Kanina
nag-top
ako
sila sa bar last year, ah. Number one ulit yung
Hindi.
UST. I'm just saying.
Ang
Yeah.
UST mo, ang canon law program mo sa UST noon, ilalaban mo yan sa mga canon law program sa Madrid.
Sa Madrid, yeah, global, yeah.
Ito sina Pilaes,
Yeah.
sina Burgos na faculty at saka teacher ng UST. Talagang may K yan.
Yes,
Ang
yes.
problema mo, yung mga praile na padating sa Pilipinas, mga latak. Bakit mga
Right,
latak yung mga
yeah.
parating na praile sa Pilipinas? Couple of reasons. Number one, nung binuksan yung Suez Canal, ang dali nang pumunta sa Pilipinas. So, hindi mo na kailangan maging dedicated friar to get to the Philippines. Pangalawa, there were various moments in Spain where magkakaroon ka ng liberal government. Ngayon, kung liberal government ka at kung conservative friar ka, gusto mong takbuhan yung liberal government na yun, pupunta kang Pilipinas. Third reason, yung mayaman na ang Pilipinas ng panahon. Export
Right.
So, kung praile ka, medyo mahina ka sa Spain, ayaw mo yung liberal government, gusto mong kumita dahil maraming lupa yung order mo sa Pilipinas, pupunta ng Pilipinas. So what's happening during this period? Yung native priests, people like, and by native I mean Creoles, Indios,
Born
mestizos,
in Las Islas, Filipinas, yeah.
pagaling ng pagaling, patalino ng patalino, yung praile na dinadala mo sa Pilipinas,
So nag-X sila, nag-X. Nag-X sa gitna, yeah.
So, and yet, yung praile na pabobo, humihingi ng privileges. So, what does it feel like to be a very smart person being lorded over by idiots? It must piss you off. It must really piss you off.
And who had almost the
yung
same
lalipin.
blood and features as you, right? Because I found the scene where Jose Burgos was with De La Torre, di ba? Na, De La Torre, open-minded, liberal, etc. But he kept on emphasizing lugar, your place, know your place. Na even the most liberal Governor General, supposedly, allegedly, was at the end of the day had this strict notion of hierarchy, which a lot of these friars were subscribing to. But I have one question for you, Lela, and I know we can talk more about this, but one of the, I won't say controversial, but one of the things that stood out for me in this, I mean, obviously Jesuits were behind this production, and I think we have to keep on emphasizing the contribution of these folks to the fruition of this movie, aside from Pepe Jokno and the fantastic team. One of the argument was, di ba yung sinabi ng mga friars, tayong sisisiin nila sa lahat ng nangyaring mali, when in fact, ang idea was, the rot in the apple really is in the secular imperial machinery. That Izquierdo, in a way, was symbolic of this violent lashes of a dying beast, which is this pathetic empire in the late 19th century, barely holding on to Cuba, and now also facing serious problem in the Philippines. How do you see that thesis? Is it an do you see that thesis as an apologia or a kind of a counterpose contra Rizalist, friar obsessive theory? Yeah.
Well, I think we should really step back din naman. I mean, madaling santuin si Pepe. Pero si Pepe naman talaga, galit na galit sa mga praile, 'di ba? And sometimes he was kind of unfair to the friars kasi he thinks in many, like for example sa Morga, sa annotation of Morga, it makes it seem as if many of the friars deleted Philippine culture, which is absolutely not true. In fact, a lot of the friars, they were the ones who preserved the dictionary. So what we know about, ancient Tagalog syllabary, for example, a lot of it comes out of the frailes. Kung walang fraile, wala tayong appreciation ng culture na yun. In fact, as early as the 16th century, kararating pa lang ng mga missionary, marami sa mga dumarating na encomendero sa Pilipinas were kind of caudillo style, expecting to do in the Philippines what they did in Mexico, meaning, kill people and make money out of the new colony. Ang mga humaharang doon were the priests and the friars. So for example, in the 16th century, yung Synod of Manila, which explicitly said na kung abusive encomendero ka, wala kang absolution from the church.
Right.
Napaka-clear nun sa records. So a lot of that history, in fact, has been deleted by the radicalism of Rizal. Rizal was kind of radical. And as with anything, it's part of it tatanggapin mo, part of it hindi mo tatanggapin. Dapat tanggapin mo
Yeah.
na during Rizal's time, abusive naman talaga yung friars, lalo na in states like, in places like Calamba. But
Yeah.
at the same time, hindi rin naman totoo yung sinasabi ni Rizal na ever since bulok na yung mga friars na yan.
Hindi sila Padre Damaso
It's
eternally. Yeah, hindi sila.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's absolutely not true. Like, you know, especially I have a student, for example, who is working on the Dominican, on kind of Dominican proto-liberal traditions under the
Right.
influence of a theologian named Father Suarez, whose brother was actually sent to the Philippines. And in many
Interesting.
ways, yung kind of ideas of proto-liberalism that would be absorbed by the Philippine Revolution were coming from these earlier forms of thinking within the friar
Interesting.
orders. And you need to recall that the major critique of the violence in Latin America had come from the friars. Kaya nung dumating na sila sa Pilipinas, ready na makipagbangayan yung mga praile against the conquistador, saying, "Ops, you cannot bleed this colony to you cannot bleed it dry the way you did
Did
Mexico."
in I don't know, with Incas and Aztec and all of that. So kaya nga hindi nangyari yung genocidal level of violence that we saw with conquistadors and all. That's a very good intervention.
Merong,
Yeah.
may violence and merong actually may decline in population, significant decline in population. So it's not true that it was a lot less sanguinary than yung colonization of Latin America, but definitely may diferensya. And one of the differences is because of this kind of intellectual movement within the friars towards a kind of humanism already. And a kind of proto-liberalism, I would say.
Interesting. Pero siguro meron din aspect of, 'di ba? Hindi naman monolithic yung the friars, 'di ba? May mga times na more dominant, may mga times na more liberal, may mga times na more reactionary. Depende din dun sa politika nila back in the Madre
Yes.
España, right? So pag sobrang liberal yung government, especially, I mean, you mentioned this dun sa isang libro mo na isa sa mga favorite kong libro sa Pilipinas, yung liberalism and post-colony, about how the Cadiz Constitution, right, probably in a way reinforce yung reactionary tendency ibang friars, because it was a huge leap for Spain to go from
Yeah.
Spain of the 17th century to, my God, Napoleonic Spain, di ba?
Yes. And then of course talaga nung by the time that Carlist Wars, nagkakaroon ka na parang similar to the United States ngayon, nagkakaroon ka na talaga ng polarization in Spanish society. And in many ways, the polarization would climax in the Spanish Civil War
Good point.
in the 20th century. And so kung praile ka, you were kind of wala ng choice. It was either you chose the liberals/Republicans or you chose the conservatives who were claiming to protect the church. And that is why, unfortunately, by the 1930s, even a enlightened university like the University of Santo Tomas
Right.
turned General Franco into their honorary rector, di ba? so yung ganong klaseng polarization where talagang a lot of the friars were funneled into reaction and fascism, actually. But that wasn't always, what I'm saying is that wasn't always the case.
Exactly. Yun nga, hindi monolithic, which is what you tend to get dun sa Rizal thesis, essentially, na eto yung mga pinakaugat. So, for you, hindi masyadong controversial yung sinasabi sa movie na, the friars were the scapegoat for the inherent brutality of the imperial regime, reactionary imperial regime towards the end of the 19th century. In fact, the part where the Bishop of Manila ba yan, na nag-intervene to make sure na they still keep their priestly vest. Is that historically correct? I mean, what is your read on
I
that?
think that is historically correct. This drove me back to Schumacher. A lot of us read Schumacher again. After
Sorry,
the
UP
film.
kami. So, our bias is like, we rather read like Benedict Anderson and Constant. The usual suspects.
Ben also never cited Jack Schumacher because he styled himself as a new left radical who never cite the kind of more conservative Athenians. So, pero bumalik ako kay Schumacher and mukhang totoo yung part na yan.
Yeah. Although, of course, di ba may intervention dun, alam naman, nakikisaw-saw ako parate dun sa back and forth mo. What's the name of that Filipino scholar in Cambridge who did this fantastic dissertation on the role of Vatican during the American...
Si Jetro
Ang galing nun. Like,
I
I went like, wow, that's so impressive. Sobrang ganda nung dissertation niya. I'm so impressed. I mean, obviously, I didn't read the whole thing, but from what I gathered, was like, wow, I had no idea. Like, the Americans didn't start with, blank slate. They had to deal with the Catholic majority country after all, right? Which they didn't make Protestant. Galing nung analysis niya.
Sana nga at one point, mapunta ni Jetro yung issue ng Lasal. Kasi Lasal, di ba
Oh.
pareho tayo ni Lasal, may
Connections,
Lasal
correct,
connection, di
correct.
ba? Lasal in many ways was supposed to be the American face of Catholicism sa Pilipinas. Kasi yung
Interesting.
American colonial government yung nagsabi na pumasok yung Lasal Brothers dito because they wanted the American Catholics to be able to compete with these more deeply ingrained
Interesting.
Hispanicized Catholic schools like
Good
Ateneo and
point.
UST.
Very good point. Very, very good point. I mean, I had no idea about it. I spent quite some time. Okay. So this was the American Catholicism. Okay, So wow. So you have UST and then Ateneo and then like, oh, wow, that's incredible. I had no idea about that. Now, going back to this, I mean, where I disagree with both of you gentlemen, or at least with the other gentleman, is in fairness, one of the reasons why I got to appreciate Schumacher, and in fact, the reason why I fervently disagree with my fellow UPian on the caution of Rizal as a revolutionary, is because Benedict Anderson, dun sa isang New Left Review argument, yung trilogy na ginawa niya about Rizal, he mentioned that it was the Schumacher letter to Rizal that was decisive. Particularly in this letter where he argued about quote-unquote, I mean, more or less preconditions for a successful revolution. Kasi kung
Yes.
magbara-bara ka mag-revolution, which is more or less what happened under a certain gentleman, you're just gonna get people killed in vain. So if you want to do a
Yeah.
successful revolution, you want to make sure there are at least 4 or 5 conditions met, including, of course, making sure my imperial overstretch, which was coming about as the Cuban independence war became crazy, which Bonifacio knew more about. So essentially, ang parang Rizal was not against revolution. He was against bara-bara, mindless violence, revolt. And second, and I think this is where Benedict Anderson's intervention was helpful to me. I don't know if you agree with him. His idea was that dahil nasa dapitan si Rizal at medyo nasa laabas siya ng, you know what I'm saying, circulation of proper information, siguro hindi siya sobrang updated dun sa gaano ka talagang vulnerable itong Spanish Empire niyan. And in a sense, mas well-informed si Bonifacio based here sa Tondo, Manila, dun sa kalagayan ng Madre España and how vulnerable they were at that moment. Except, he was not successful. It was Aguinaldo who was successful in pushing it to its logical limit. I mean, what do you say about that? Yeah.
Alam mo, lahat ng revolusyonaryo disimulado.
Mm.
So hindi lahat ng hindi naman naamin lagi ang revolusyonaryo ng full intent nila. This is what we forget.
Correct.
Is it possible, for example, that Burgos was a separatist? Unlikely, but possible. Kasi hindi mo naman alam, kasi hindi ka naman naamin, papatayin ka kung umamin ka eh.
Correct.
Is it possible that that when Rizal said that he was going to build a colony in Borneo, is it possible that he was doing that in order to build a revolutionary army? Possible. Hindi ka naman naamin eh. Diba? And if you look at, for example, ang magandang example dito, yung 1972, again, yung comparison. Marami sa mga gusto magrevolusyon ng panahon, hindi naman papahuling buhay in public. Si Aquino, nakikipag-meeting sa mga komunista, ready mag-arm revolt, nagbibigay ng pera at ng baril sa CPP. Publicly, aminin ba niya yun? Hindi.
Yeah.
Aba, nung nahuli siya, inaccuse siya na ginagawa niya yun. Aba, deny ng deny. Di ba? Kasi hindi ka naman papahuling buhay. Lahat ng revolusyonaryo, hindi mo papahuling buhay yan under repressive circumstances. So, when we ask the question, was Burgos revolutionary? We need to take into consideration the fact that a lot of it is shrouded by mystery, and a lot of it we just can't answer.
The cloak and dagger. I mean, it's a game of cloak and dagger also. I mean, there is, you know, you're revolutionary. I mean, it's essentially Simon, right? That's what he does in El Filibusterismo. The other side of Rizal, I mean, if you read El Filibusterismo, I think pretty much it's clear that Rizal is for revolution, but for the right conditions. Ayun yung ginawa ni Simon na just out of hatred, just, you know, anarchy style of, you know, a revolt. So that's the reading I have there. Yeah.
Going back to Schumacher. Schumacher says that he can kind of date it. By the 1880s, Rizal was a convinced separatist. In other words, he did not believe that the Philippines had a future with Spain.
Right.
Separatist na siya. September.
Oops, sorry, I accidentally. Okay, go ahead. I'll just connect it na lang. Yeah. So what you're arguing is that Schumacher mentions that
Nakamute ka.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I accidentally pressed something. So what are your
So
yeah,
bro,
Schumacher.
Kasi yung initial propaganda movement sa Spain, when they said Filipino kami, they did not refer to that as a separate term.
Yeah.
They talked about that the way a Catalan would talk about being Catalan, meaning I'm Catalan but I'm also Spaniard. I'm part of this kind of broader multicultural Spain. So when sina Del Pilar, sina Rizal used that in La Solidaridad, Filipino kami, they meant the same way you would say Basque or Catalan. But by the 1880s, when Rizal used Filipino, ibig sabihin niya hiwalay na talaga yun. So it was,
Right.
for him, it was just a matter of time. And question na lang paano ka makakarating doon. Pero that was the inevitability and the goal for
So
Rizal.
it's a tactical rather than a strategic question. If I were to use my
Napakalinaw ng pro-independence si Rizal.
Tactical
Hindi
lang siya.
deny na pro-independence si Rizal. And also, I mean, just think about the ito, matagal na natin itong alam, di ba? The Katipunan is of course a radical wing of La Liga Filipina, breakaway radical section of La Liga Filipina, na si Rizal ang founder. I mean, even the name Katipunan is in many ways Tagalog for what? Liga.
Correct.
So, talaga in many ways, pag sinabi ng, the Spanish government was saying like, si Rizal ang founder ng Katipunan, in many ways, they were true, di ba?
And look at how Bonifacio and the rest.
Tatawagin mo silang sinungaling kasi ayaw mo maniwala doon sa mga pasisista. But in many ways, they're right. Same thing, with Marcos. Marcos was the greatest supporter, Aquino was the greatest supporter of the CPP. Sasabihin mo kay Marcos, hindi sinungaling ka. Pero actually, in certain respects, he's right. Know? Pero hindi aaminin ng lantaran nung inaakusa mo. Bakit mo aaminin? Di ba? Bakit mo aaminin?
I just have a question, Leloy. Didn't Rizal sign up to go as a doctor to Cuba, and that's where he was caught and brought back and executed? Yes. What was? Kasi, sorry, I just have to raise that because some are using that as a basis to say, well, like, if Rizal was really for revolution and all, why would he do that? Was that his way of fooling the Spanish about his intentions, true intention? What was going on there?
I read about this, no? Pero a lot of people say yun yung katraidoran ni Rizal, di ba, na nag-sign up siya. That's very common, but number one, doktor. Hindi ka naman papatay, di ba? Pangalawa, he really wanted part of it seems like he really wanted out of Dapitan. Parang depressed na siya sa Dapitan.
Right.
So,
he was losing it, yeah.
In contemporary parlance, it was a mental health move.
All right.
That's what I think.
Interesting.
There was a kind of depression that set in Dapitan already, and he just wanted out. Remember, taong gala ito. Was it the most ideal move? No. Was it katraidoran? I don't think so. Like
not even close.
He was done with Dapitan, and he saw an exit.
Interesting. Which friars were smart enough to realize that this is not him showing his fealty and loyalty to Madre España. This was just his way of finding a way back into the into the ring.
Ikaw mismo, mahilig kang bumaya, di ba? Imagine if somebody clipped your wings and said, dito ka lang sa Mindanao. Di ba? Parang,
yeah, exactly. Mababaliw ka talaga. Mababaliw.
Kiti ka rin kahit paano.
I mean, anywhere. I mean, I love Manila, I love Baguio, but if I stay there straight more than a month, like, I need to move, right? Medyo nomadic, eh. That's where you get your energy and all of that. And who knows? He wanted to make a trilogy, diba? He wanted the third part, so probably wanted to go to Paris eventually, somewhere else and all. Now, I have another question, Leloy. There's this also part whereby Marcelo del Pilar, which I think is a very good argument that Rizal actually gave up on the whole integrationist approach. But Marcelo del Pilar mentioned that in 1890, may mga intermediaries and interlocutors from the friars came to his, I think, brother or something like that, and then they tried to push for this kind of an accommodation na bubukas kami ng what they call that colonial council, Cámara Colonial, where it will kind of create what I term as constitutional colonialism, right? Whereby yung governor general mo is not just some caudillo who can do whatever he wants. And one of the powers he may lose is the power to exile anyone without a court decision. So some sort of due process. There'll be a new party open to young Filipinos. May bagong dyaryo, which Rizal and Del Pilar should write for. Ito yung sinabi ni Del Pilar. Sila raw ay magtatayo rin naman ng isang periodikong dyaryo at tayo raw ay magsusulat sa periodikong yan. Doon sa letter niya kay Rizal. Ang hiningi lang daw nila ay wag natin silang banggain, referring to the friars. What do you think about this? Was this what was it, co-optation strategy? Was just like, I don't know, smoke and mirrors? What was going on there?
I'd like to grant that meron naman talagang segments of the Spanish colonial bureaucracy na more accommodationist.
Yeah.
And then they realized na yung demands ng mga Pilipino ay actually, they were not the most unreasonable demands.
Yeah.
Actually, if you go back, I think one of the reasons why na-radicalize si Rizal is because napaka-baseline lang naman ng demands
Yeah,
namin.
exactly. Yeah.
Hindi nyo tinutugunan, di ba? Secularization of the parishes, secular education, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, basic liberal rights, di ba? So, hindi mo tinugunan yung basic liberal rights, and screw you. And I think by this point, Rizal was just like, we've tried so many times, just because sinabi nito ngayon, hindi ibig sabihin na tutugunan nila. So,
Right.
yun yung reading ko doon. Na siguro by this time parang over na si Rizal dyan. Kaya talaga
Interesting.
umalis na talaga siya ng Espanya, 'di ba? Sabi nga niya dapat ang gamot ilapit sa pasyente. Kaya umuwi na siya ng Pilipinas eh.
Exactly, which tells you like he wanted to bring revolution back to home, right? And wala na yung mga reformist, procedural, middle ground kind of approach. Now, I just last question on the Rizal thing. What do you think about all of this racialization of Rizal? Because obviously he was not Creole, but he had a very strong Chinese blood. In fact, I saw a wax of him dun sa isang post ni Ambet Ocampo, like really Chino. I mean, he could look like the guys nearby here, just Savior, di ba? He could pass as any. I mean, ano bang alam natin talaga about Rizal? Ano ba si Chinoy ba siya or like more Tagal? Like what was going on there?
Ayun, Chinese mestizo are actually just mestizo.
Right.
Nakakalimutan
Right.
natin na in the 19th century, if you said mestizo, you meant Chinese mestizo. So,
Right.
if you did not put qualifiers, you just said mestizo, ibig sabihin ng Chinese.
Right.
And Rizal was part of that. He's Chinese the way Noy, Cory, ganyan. Ganyan klaseng mestizo Chinese na highly acculturated, highly nationalist, di ba? In fact, yung mga mestizo they're the people who are actually more nationalist than nationalist. Maybe think of somebody like Cory or Noy,
Yeah,
diba?
or ano,
Very nationalist, but also very, very Chinese mestizo.
I mean, neighboring Malaysia, right? The people, I didn't know that when I read about it, I was fascinated that actually the Chinese Malaysian played a very important role in, formalizing yung bahasa as we understand it today.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea about that. That it was,
that's
fantastic.
May
Yeah,
librong kailangan basahin dyan, which is Taming Babel by Rachel Liu. Who looks at the
interesting.
politics of language in Malaysia. One of my favorite
Fantastic, di ba? It's so amazing. So, kaya nga sabi ko minsan like, how ridiculous some of our arguments are about, hindi ito purong Pinoy, hindi ito totoong Pinoy dahil Chinoy siya. Like, are you kidding me? Like Rizal, di ba meron siyang ancestral home sa China or something? Sa Fujian?
Hindi ko alam, hindi ko sure about that.
I don't know, I saw some news about that. But anyway, why is there like that thumbs up?
Oy, bro, pero ito ang sabihin ko, saan ba nanggaling itong pride of the Malayan race na yan? May kanyang klaseng bullshit na sa Pilipinas. Pero actually, what is Malayan? Malayan is Malay, for me Malayan is Malay speaking. Now, in the 16th century, there were elite Malay speakers in Manila, largely because Manila was a trading port, and if you wanted to trade, you had to speak Malay. Pero Malay as a race is actually kind of like, it's ill-defined. There's really no such thing as a Malayan race, di ba? There's such a thing as Austronesian speakers who populate most of Southeast Asia. Pero Malay is really weird. Now, for us to latch onto this idea of Malay kay Rizal is partly a function of racialized mag-isip yung mga tao, but it's also kasalanan ng current Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, who nung panahon ni Erap, pumunta siya sa Pilipinas at nagbigay ng napakaraming lecture tungkol kay Rizal about Rizal being the pride of the Malayan race. Now, I don't want to be ungenerous to our Malaysian friends, but keep your racialized communist politics
out of exactly.
Yeah. Wag niyo kami pakialaman ng ganyan, di ba? Hindi kami kagaya niyo na lahat ng tao kailangan kina-categorize based on their race, di ba?
Don't bring your Bumiputra politics. Don't bring your Bumiputra politics here. Thankfully, we're not into that.
Ginagawa niya. Now remember si Anwar nung panahon ngayon medyo mas post-racial na si Anwar, di ba? Pucha nung 1990s, UMNO member pa rin. He was slated to become the Prime Minister of, let's face it, a kind of race supremacist party.
Right.
Of a Malay supremacist party. So obviously, tatawagin niyang si Rizal ng pride of Malayan race dito sa Pilipinas dahil meron siyang, may political reason for him to do that at the time.
But okay, to top that, I think Mahathir called Pacquiao as the pride of the Malayan people nung may
Hayop talaga to
so
Mata eh.
I'm just telling you like na top na ni
Madami to
Mahathir
eh.
pa rin yung protege niya na. If you wanna bring Rizal, even si Pacquiao dinamay dyan sa Malayan race kind of thing. Kasi I was when you say Malayans kasama rin mga Thai siguro doon or like Myanmar like yun nga like anything but Chinese or white parang ganon.
Southern Thai, I
Yun,
don't
yun
know.
nga eh, like
Why don't you just say
Southeast
para
Asian
wag
pride.
racial, the pride of
ASEAN.
pride of Southeast
Yeah,
Asia. Pride
ASEAN.
of ASEAN.
Exactly. Yun nga, eh, you're absolutely right. Yung mga Malaysians, maybe they also should keep quiet about our South China Sea policy.
Ayan. Yeah, no,
Isa pa yan.
makialam.
Isa,
Isa ka pa, Anwar, ha? Isa
hindi
pa,
ka nga
Anwar.
tumutulong. Pasaway ka pa. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think
Ayop.
I really enjoyed this episode. Thank you very much, bro. I really had to bring out yung Barcelona. Yeah, he was going to Cuba kind of thing because again, that argument is raised against your guy, Rizal from Ateneo. Thank you so much, bro.
Thank you.
Okay, ito, let's do it more contemporary. Last episode natin. Okay, ito, bro. We had a lot of discussion about GOMBURZA, Rizal, Palays. Ang dami natin na-cover in, just roughly 40-45 minutes. That was fantastic. Medyo nag-bash ka rin sa Malaysia. I don't want to talk about them. Baka I get in trouble. Ito, bro. Balikan natin ito. So recently I got into trouble again. Surprise when I had this piece for Journal of Democracy. The title is The Sun Also Rises, which is not my title. It's kind of sounds like the title of sila yung mga malutikiya type, yung mga posts nila nung time nung election. But anyway, I'm not disowning it. Many people liked it anyway. Now
Okay lang yan.
no, I think it was cool. And then dun sa opening lines and all of that, of course, I use the term quote unquote. Everyone expected essentially like this, and what came out is kind of a weird pseudo reformer, pseudo tough on South China Sea, or maybe not so pseudo in fairness on the South China Sea. So each side is interpreting it different ways. I was kind of in hot waters, which is something I don't mind. Actually, I'm beginning to enjoy. Now I've been enjoying this debates and all of that.
Matagal ka ng hasang-hasayan.
Naghahanap talaga ako eh.
Sa big R talaga, oh.
But
Matagal ka ng big R.
okay, delikado tayo dyan. But bro, ito. Having said that, many people don't read that. Towards the end of the article, I still argue that I'm still standing by my first Journal of Democracy piece where I said he could still become an insidious threat to Philippine democracy in light of the Chacha discussion. Now, before going to the whole Chacha debate and all, I just want to get your point of view as a historian. But don't you think na there's also this element na hindi man kadiri, pero parang yung mga Western countries, masyado ba silang tuwan-tuwa kay Marcos bigla? Is the contrast with Duterte pushing people to I mean, ikaw anong basa mo dito? Kasi I think you and I argue that hindi siya naging Tatay 2.0 or Marcos Senior 2.0. Sure. But at the same time, I think that we're falling into a different fallacy, which is we're overreading into the not so bad things. So I'm gonna be bashed now by the BBM people.
Ikaw yung nagsabi sa akin na marami ka nakakausap sa diplomatic community na ang unang tanong sa'yo is, kamusta ang presidente nyo? How's the president? Is he really fine? Ganyan. So I will defer to you on that, pero I think babalikan ko lang yung kwento na yun. When I think about Western countries falling in love with BBM, yung mga interactions na yun yung lagi kong nakaalala. So makatanong lang kita, meron ka pa bang mga ganong klaseng interactions?
Oo, ang dami, bro. But the other thing is, I'm not gonna say who. I met an editor from a very big international magazine. I'm not gonna say which. Mamaya text siya. And then like we were talking about diplomats and all, and parang sinabi niya, parang shock siya na yung mga Western diplomats in general ay tuwan-tuwa kay BBM and all of that, na parang sobrang parang invested sila dyan. And for me, I understand where that comes from, pero parang I don't know, medyo baka you know what I'm saying, like I just want to make sure that people don't get ahead of themselves. Kasi for me, one thing good I realized with BBM is that, alam mo yung term na ginamit ni Bernie Sanders, you may not like Hillary Clinton, but unlike Trump, at least you can keep her leg next to the fire, right? There will be some responsiveness and accountability, which you'll not get with Trump. my sense with Duterte was the same. Good luck, getting a counter. But with
Oh, yeah,
BBM,
yeah.
I feel if you pressure him, you push back, etc., he will be responsive, especially from outside. So ang fear ko is baka sa over-embrace sa kanya, ang suspecha ko nga siya yung magiging speaker of Shangri-La Dialogue soon, which is a very big defense event. So I see all of these people from all over the world, Western countries come over, gushing over him and all of that. My fear is that might make that argument a bit weaker because if he feels that everyone is so invested in him, then he might be a little bit more adventurous and push the envelope. Especially itong Chacha. Medyo nag-worry ako, bro. Kasi this Chacha that's the thing. People are bashing me for saying I'm pinapabango ko si BBM, but actually I was among the first person to warn about this Chacha last year pa lang, the first time I heard about it. Kasi I can see the logic of Chacha. That's how you avoid Sara Duterte winning in 2028, right? I-Chacha mo yan, parliamentary, lagay mo lang si Martin Romualdez, whoever there. Then, solve na yung problem mo. But a lot of things could also go wrong along the way. Now, yung isang week, probably you heard yung discussion namin with Ronaldo. Si BBM came out and said, hindi, ayoko itong PI na ito, itong People's Initiative, Chacha na ito. Si Zubiri, nagdrama-drama, away-away, mga ganon. But, last time I checked, I heard
Totoo
from...
ba yun, bro? Or sa tingin mo, moro-moro lang yung away nila ni Zubiri?
Hindi, mukhang panic talaga ang Senate kasi bro, magiging irrelevant sila. Ang gustong mangyari ng Congress is they will ram it through the Senate, which is like 20 plus people, 20 odd people. Ilan ba yung Kongreso? 300 plus, di ba? They're trying to make the Senate irrelevant, di ba? Kaya nga ako curious ako yung maging stance ni Raffy Tulfo dito eh. But the thing is, parang si Salceda pa sino man nagsabi na actually may plano talaga by third quarter of this year yata, June or July, ipapa-push na itong referendum na ito and then push it all the way unless the Supreme Court steps in. So crazy things could still happen, bro.
So,
Which will negate...
Anong basa mo ngayon sa Supreme Court kung ganyan? Kasi primarily Duterte appointees pa rin yan. So you have two big institutions na kalaban mo, yung Senado at yung Supreme Court. Although, there are ways in which kayang mandohan ng incumbent president ang Supreme Court kahit appointee yan ng previous president, di ba? Kayang takutin yan eh.
Yeah.
In various ways, di ba? And we saw this, for example, well, yung extreme version nito, yung kay Corona, of course, kay Noy. Pero kayang takutin ng Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can be disciplined by a very, very strong executive. So anong laro? Is there a way forward here? I guess my question is, kaya ba to, is this possible? Kasi many have tried since FVR, di ba? In many ways, almost every president, with the exception, I think, of Noynoy Aquino, who should have actually been the one to try, by the way.
He kind of said in an interview with Rappler, he kind of said something along those lines, pero he never acted upon it, at least per Ronaldo. The real Big R. Sabi ni Real Big R na, yes, he was just thinking out loud, but actually he never raised that in cabinet meetings. Because I point blank asked Ronaldo. Sabi ko, Sir Ronaldo, si Pinoy din, sinabi niya rin yung sa Rappler. Hindi, sabi niya, actually, si Pinoy lang talagang hindi nag-effort in that direction.
Right,
the other ones may plano talaga.
What makes them think and what makes those people who think that this is possible, what makes them think that they can succeed where others have failed?
Ako kasi, yun nga, one reason kasi remember I don't know if you remember one of the discussion we had. Hindi ka pala kasama kasi wala yung internet mo. Yung parang sinabi Ronaldo na baka nga if the father started the NPA communist rebellion, baka the son will oversee its end. Not because of his brilliance but because of timing. And then I thought maybe the same argument could work also in constitutional change na while all of us are so excited about, BBM not turning out as Duterte and him going after Duterte in some way. In fact, speaking of your Supreme Court question, that's where the ICC comes in. I think if ICC comes in, all all bets are off, di ba? And speaking of Supreme Court, there was a study that pinost ni Professor Munsod last year, which showed that rarely do Supreme Court justices vote against an incumbent that appointed them. Well, Duterte is not an incumbent anymore, right? And then if ICC comes in, I think there'll be kind of I won't say liberal revolution, but there'll be a liberal wave because it's gonna energize all the progressive and liberals in the Philippines. It's gonna bring out all of this discourse about accountability. BBM medyo maging mabango siya and inevitably will be kinda in the liberal camp, di ba? So I cannot foresee a situation where the Supreme Court will try to act conservative in a situation where the ICC comes in. So for me, the one big factor will be whether ICC warrants of arrest will be issued this year, if ever there were gonna be. Ronald was always more optimistic than me. Ako, I think it's always splitting the difference. So I'm interviewing Ruben Carranza, soon to also discuss the ICJ, ICC issues. Marami nangyari all around the
Nice,
world.
nice, nice.
So we'll also have a special episode on that, forward ko sa'yo. So I'm not gonna pretend that I have a final answer on this issue. Now, speaking of the Chacha issue, clearly I think Martin Romualdez and some people there have an interest in pushing with this because it's a question of timing. Because
And Sara Duterte. The
yeah,
question of Sara Duterte.
it's a question of Sara Duterte. It's a fear that if they wait this out after the midterms, baka kung ma-delay na yan by 2026, no one cares about BBM anymore. And everyone's gonna talk about Tulfo and Sara and maybe Riza, right, as the next presidential balls 2028. So as BBM himself said correctly in 2014-15 when he was a senator, if you're gonna do this, do it while you're still in your early years in office. So maybe behind the scenes there is an understanding. Maybe BBM is saying the PI1, the way it's being done. Napanood mo yung commercial na Etsepuera? Yung,
Yun na,
diba?
hindi ko pinanood, pero
Sobrang
nabalitaan ko.
sloppy, diba? Sobrang sloppy. I mean, and then you have a situation na Pulong, Robin Hood Padilla coming out against this Chacha. Like, this is weird. Like, wait, you guys Duterte are pro
Kayo
Chacha.
yung OG, kayo yung OG.
Exactly. So
And it's very interesting. Anong opinion ni Tita Arroyo, the great Chacha advocate?
alam mo, parang quiet si tita. Kasi hindi nga siya...
Diba siya si
hindi nga siya...
I want a parliamentary system for the Philippines.
Oy, hindi na siya ngayon, magandang-ganda siya ngayon, ha? Medyo, yung mga, parang Enrile yung mga yan, tatanda yan na maganda. Now, I mean, going back to tita, alam mo na, di ba? Kung mayaman ka today, there are many ways to keep very, very young. Okay. Or unless you're Papa P. I mean, my goodness, Piolo Pascual is almost 50 rata. Like, he looks like a 20-year-old guy. He looks so fit and strong. Diba, grabe yun. No sugar daw siya. Good luck doing that. If it doesn't, do you do sugar, bro? I mean, I cannot write and all kung walang sugar at all. Nahihirapan ako. I don't know. Carbs maybe I can cut, but sugar, I don't know. So, good luck kung you wanna go Papa P in our profession. But going back to this, bro. My sense is, there are really some people invested and want to get this through. BBM, siguro hindi siya natuwa dun sa the way the Etsapuera thing happened and sloppiness of that. But if they can do this in a more sophisticated fashion and stealthy fashion, I don't think BBM will stand in their way. But I think if mag-iingay tayong lahat, and there's going to be international pressure, maybe BBM will kind of say, okay, let's slow this down or consider some other option. Kasi they have three options: PI, Constituent Assembly, CONAS, and Constitutional Convention, right? So he has to make the decision very soon. And as I said, I think the clincher here is the ICC. Because if the ICC decision comes in the next 3 months, sa sobrang gulo mangyari, bro, baka doon pa nila ipupush ito, di ba? I mean, you can imagine, if ICC war, oh my God, ang gulo nun, di ba, bro? And then that's exactly where, okay, ipasa natin to, di ba?
Alam mo, bro, yung isip ko lang, kailan talaga kasi, yung difficulty ko dito is, kailan naman kasi talagang pag-usapan ng Chacha eh.
Actually, I was just about to say.
Yun
But Prime Minister talaga tayo, bro.
Kasi hindi naman talaga, we do not have a perfect constitution.
We don't. Yeah.
And one of the nice things about the unraveling of the EDSA narrative is, hindi na sinasanto yung konstitusyon na yan. Except for a couple of people who think na parang lahat nandun sa konstitusyon na yan.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, si Mr. Christian Monsod, who was one of the
I was
drafters
just
of the
about to say.
constitution, still thinks that if we had just followed the constitution to a letter, then many of our problems could have been averted. No, I think there are really fundamental problems in the constitution.
Such as, I mean, what is your take? I have my
For
take,
one
but
thing,
yeah.
For one thing, kailangan na talagang ilibing si Claro Recto. Hindi pa natin patay na si Claro Recto, pero hindi pa natin nalilibing si Claro Recto. What do we mean by that? Yung economically nationalist
nationalist,
na
protectionism.
dinadaya lang din naman ng mga mayayaman. So that the people who are able to come in with foreign business partners are those people who are able to cheat the system. You should really get rid of that completely, di ba? And marami na mga advocate niyan. I remember nung 2016 election, ang pinakamalaking advocate niyan, si Only Pinay. Right? Yung panahon na yun.
Lodi yan, Lodi.
Alam na talagang pag-usapan yun. And yung parliamentary system. Parliamentary system is actually for a country like the Philippines, I think it could work, di ba? Because we really need to tell people na pag-isipan ng partido. Mahina ang party democracy natin. So of course, there are many ways to build a party-based democracy, but one way to do that is to creating a structure that inherently encourages people to think in terms of party. If you like a president, pwede pa rin naman may president on top of the prime minister.
Symbolic, yeah, kind of a ceremonial.
Oo, pwede naman kung mahilig talaga tayo sa presidente since uso sa atin ang directly elected president. So pwede pa rin naman 'yun, 'di ba? So yung problema ko is kailangan mo talaga pag-usapan, but
Yeah.
when are we ever going to trust our politicians enough na pag sinabi nila, pag-usapan natin yung chacha, hindi natin pagsususpetsyahan na may ulterior motive? Will it ever get to that point?
Parang
Hindi ko-
malabo rin, di ba? Okay, let's go
Hindi
now with
talaga
BBM.
possible ba? Si
Shucks.
Noy.
Shucks.
Kung si Noy
I
sinabi
know.
niya, palitan na natin itong konstitusyon ng
Pero
nanay
wala
ko.
na. That window closed, bro. Wala na.
Oo nga
Good
eh,
luck,
diba?
bro.
So, ewan ko.
I don't know, bro. I mean, are we gonna wait for a Rafi Tulfo or Riza administration? I don't know, bro. Kasi, I'll be honest, as I said, I don't mind seeing a prime minister in the Philippines. I think your type, my type, has even a better chance in the parliamentary system, right? I mean, mga ka-age
exactly.
natin, nagiging prime minister na sa France, di ba? So,
Exactly.
honestly, in theory, personally, I like a more parliamentary system because I think there could be more choices for people like you and I, who
Yes,
find the
yes.
current system just too like incorrigible, right? So I am in it, but yun nga eh, I mean, to be honest, like speaking of the ceremonial president, diba? BBM has sovereign immunity because he's the president of the republic. If they do a cha-cha, and even if he just becomes ceremonial president, he'll still have that sovereign immunity, right?
Oo nga.
So
Oo,
he can
oo,
still travel without any trouble to United States
Oo
almost
nga,
ad
oo
infinitum. Because ceremonial president can have another 6-year tenure in office. And then yung prime minister, whoever na lang, siguro si Martin Muna or whatever. I'm just saying, ang laki ng incentive for BBM to seal the deal on the Chacha issue.
seal the deal.
It's a
Seal the
question
deal.
of how he does it, under what circumstances. So siguro at some point, I hate to say this, Lelo, I hate to say, I really like that you said what you said, right? Because at some point, tanggapin na dapat natin, magkakaroon talaga ng some sort of charter change. It's just a question of how bad or what's the best we can get out of it considering the state of play. You know, like, I hate saying that. It's defeatist, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Kasi sa tingin ko yung anti-EDSA narrative freaked out a lot of the Dilawan eh. Kung strategy lang ba? Strategy lang ha. Sabihin natin kung ako si na Martin. Hindi ko babanatan yung EDSA. Gagawin ko napaka-naro. Anti-Sara.
But yun nga eh, but isn't that how we're mararop-in tayo dyan, no?
Anti-Sara. Baka may manakuha pa akong Dilawan. Di ba? Medyo bobo yung move eh.
Yeah. But bro, may mga dilawan daw na nagsaside with Sara against this Chacha, no? I mean, what yung mga never Marcos type. Oh, by the way, shout out kay Director Vince Tanyada joining us. Baka mamaya pati si Pepe Joke na mag-join dito. But kaya ingat lang tayo sa mga sinasabi natin sa mga pelikula. Shout out, sir. Now, going back to this, Leloy. Kaya nga gustong-gusto kitang kausap kasi you say the things na very like ay mukhang mapunta na tayo dyan eh. Like, it's just a matter of how we're just gonna cross that bridge. We have to, I mean, honestly, bro, I'm thinking about it. Hindi mag-work talaga the way Philippines is. Ang labo na manalo yung isang matinong presidente. Even if manalo yung matinong presidente, kung yung kongreso may puro mga ganyan tao, parang ang labo eh. So, a part of me is...
yun talaga. No system is
lock siya eh. And you're absolutely right. Constitution should be a living document that fits the purpose of the moment. And the moment is...
Meron isang, I don't know kung minor to, but, you know, as a women's rights advocate, there's one thing in this constitution that I absolutely hate. Constitutional ban on abortion.
And divorce maybe
There's
also?
a constitutional ban on abortion. Diba? So, this is... for me, that makes a certain part of the document a theocratic document. Hindi eternal yung document.
Spanish era.
There are many things about sila nakakainis.
Yeah. How dare you, just because you come from a woke place, Berkeley, California, to impose your values on us? You know, like, President Trump will fix that problem in 2025. Ayan.
Diba?
My God.
Nga, Republican wet dream yung constitution natin, di ba? My God, may constitutional ban on abortion. Now, the Americans got hold of that. Oh my God.
I'm telling my friend. Oh, actually, US is interesting, right? I think this is the Supreme Court with the most number of Catholics, right? Like,
Oo nga, no?
five or six na Catholic justices. Like, That's unprecedented. I never. I mean, like U.S. Supreme Court is feeling very Filipino
Uh,
nowadays, right?
uh,
I mean, their jurisprudence, their argument. I'm just saying, it's just an amazing detail that came to my mind. But going back to
so
this,
bro, paano na?
yeah.
Paano na? Ano, is there a way to move forward here?
Okay, okay. I'll put aside my Ilustrado side, and I'll just be a wonky guy. As a wonk, this is my suggestion: make the most ingay and pressure, so that if this chacha is about to happen, A, you avoid Sarah, if you are never Duterte camp, and B, get the least bad version out of this chacha, and C, hope that we still can inject some good elements into that, so that 5 to 10 years from now we can get a decent prime minister or two, or at least some good political party. So this is a three-step wonky approach I have. The Ilustrado in me, of course, will go against any kind of, as I said, you cannot fix the problem if the problem is the fixer. But yun nga that's the problem. Yung Ilustrado natin, side natin, minsan malabo yan sa katotohanan ng ating politika. So, I'm actually conflicted, bro, on this point. I'm excited, I'm very
conflicted ako.
anxious. I'm very anxious,
At
but
saka meron pa rin meron pa rin part of me. This is a Marcos trying to change the constitution.
which is what we can use against him to pressure him not to mumbo jumbo it, right? Because the
I mean,
specter of a
gusto ko
market.
for someone na may trauma pa rin, and I didn't live through it, but I've studied it a lot, and I know how it works, and I know kung paano talaga binaboy yung legal system natin nung 72, di ba? Marcos proposing constitutional change is, it gives me goosebumps, and I don't know if that's fair to say na, maybe in his mind he's like, have I not proven to you that I'm not my father? I don't know, pero yung gut reaction lang, yung gut lang talaga, nakakatakot yun if there's a Marcos. Is that the guy named Ferdinand Marcos is proposing to change the constitution? My God, that gives me goosebumps. And I don't know how fair that is, but that's just a kind of gut reaction on my part.
But my point is, isn't that also the weapon of the opposition, right? It's so easy to mobilize international opinion if you say, can you blame me if I cannot trust constitutional change? I think the term even they use is not. This is not an EDSA constitution. This is not a This is a Aquino constitution we want to fix. Like that whole rhetoric, that Maharlika-ish Marcos rhetoric. I don't know. I think the Maharlika investment fund episode. I'm not making the Dilawan argument. I think it showed some interesting things. It showed that it's not too hard to mobilize against the Marcoses when they bring up this nostalgic argument. At the same time, it also shows that Marcos will push through if he wants with something that is close to his, I don't know, whatever brand. But C, it also shows that in the end, you can come up with a version that is not as evil as critics thought. I mean, look at the final version of the Maharlika Investment Fund compared to the first version proposed. It's so much better. So that's a good argument, right? I think the Maharlika Investment Fund is kind of a microcosm of what could happen in a Chacha situation. That's a good parallel, diba? I just thought about it right now. Now, maybe this could give us... That's a good point. Thank you so much, Ria, bro. Napaisip ako bigla doon. I think this could be a good test case.
So you're saying hindi ito 72. Hindi si Gilbert Teodoro, walang failed assassination attempt kay Gilbert Teodoro. Hindi nila aarestuhin hindi nila aarestuhin si Zubiri, si Risa Ontiveros. They're going to ram something through peacefully. And then in that peaceful process, hopefully makapasok tayo.
It's a mixed bag. It's just a question of how mixed. Like in what direction? Like it's gonna be 50 shades. Is it darker shades or lighter shade? Of course, the Mark Twain thing history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. But what's less than rhyme? I think that's what's gonna happen.
Hindi ko alam.
It doesn't rhyme, but it's just less than rhyme. Yeah.
But there is already one thing I'm sure of. Sigurado ako that by disposition, this Ferdinand Marcos is not the same as the older Ferdinand Marcos. Yun parang anybody who makes the argument na ang disposition nito at ang end goal nito is similar to the fathers.
You're right.
I think lolokohan na lang tayo, okay? Love him or hate him, you have to hate him for different reasons. If you hate him, and there are reasons to hate him, but you have to hate him from different reasons, from the reasons you hated the father. Dahil obviously, ibang-ibang tao ito. So if he rams through a constitutional change, it is going to look very different from yung ginawa ng tatay niya. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I myself am...
No, but I think that's a good analysis. That's a good analysis. I think if Amy Marcos were the president right now, I would make a slightly different argument. Wouldn't you? It's like, honestly, that was always my point. I mean, people can attest. Before elections, I said, BBM, iba yan. It's not Marcos Sr. I always said, but I didn't say it's necessarily a good thing. I just said don't panic. Literally, my article the day after Marcos won for Nikki Asia was no cause for panic. I didn't say it's going to be good. I just said don't go for the eject bottom yet, diba? Fight for whatever is left of our democracy. In
Yeah.
fact, things could go in right direction. And thank God, so far I've been proven right. So I think the next chapter right now is how do we approach this chacha?
Ang chismis, by the way, is very conflicted. Yung chismis lang to, pero very conflicted yung relationship ni BBM sa tatay niya. Hindi yung kind of unambiguous adoration.
Chismis ba yan or parang more or less open secret na yan?
Open secret, na
Yeah.
parang, na hindi
Yeah.
sila, they did not get along.
No,
all
they
the time.
didn't. Yeah, they didn't. And you know, I'm working on a book on Marcos, Return of Marcos, is based on yung mga Journal of Democracy pieces among others. And what the episode I'm really most interested in is the Hawaii days. You know, when the dad passed
Dami daw
away.
tension.
Yeah.
Hindi narinig ko. Dami daw
Yes, a
tension
lot
between
happened
mga
there.
dating
So I need to go to
sa
Hawaii and
Hawaii.
meet my relatives Ilocano there and get chismis and all. You know, that's a very, very. I think that explains all of these differences we're seeing. Because let's not forget, as our good friend Manuel Quezon III said, he was the last hawk. He was a very aggressive man in the last hours of his father's regime. So something really happened during that exile. I mean, if I can interview him directly, I doubt that I can get something out of him on that. But I want to research that because I think the Hawaii days were really the decisive moments. And, you know, there's something also about Hawaii. It makes you a little bit mellowed down and soul search. Soul search is much easier. I know. Thank you so much. Wag na tayo mag-polvoronic discussions. Thank you so much, bro. I really appreciate this. God bless. Thank you very much, bro.
Thank you, salamat.
Salamat.
Bro, I gotta
Yes, go. Thank you very much, bro.
Papa-blood test ako.
Ang ganda nan. And good luck and healthy, stay healthy and strong and hope to catch up with you soon.
Catch up with
Ingat,
you,
bro.
sir. Bye.
God bless. Alright, thank you very much guys. Pasensya na, medyo napatagal tayo, medyo late na ito. Yeah, i-upload ko rin yan sa podcast natin, si Aya nagtanong. Kasi nga, yung kausap po natin nasa UC Berkeley, so that's 16 hours time difference. So 7 a.m. sa kanya, kanina na nagsimula tayo. So pasensya na kung medyo late tayo nagsimula, but that's the earliest I could get out of him and before he gets back to his work. So God bless, thank you very much. I hope na-appreciate yung discussion na ito. I-upload din natin dun sa platforms natin, particularly sa YouTube and Facebook. Sa TikTok kasi parang feeling ko hindi mo na-appreciate masyado and these are long conversation up to 10 minutes lang pwede ko. So yung mga ka-TikTokers natin, please follow us, Richard Haydarian Vlogs sa YouTube and Richard Foronda Haydarian sa Facebook para sa mga full versions na ito. I hope you appreciate it. Hindi ito, iba yung flavor itong discussion natin with Leloy compared dun sa kaibigan natin sila Ronaldo and Mark Gamboa, Marco. But it's also beautiful and important in its own way, especially pag pinag-usapan natin si Rizal, pinag-usapan natin ang ating kasaysayan at ang kahalagaan nito sa ating contemporary politics. And yeah, tough questions and really good temporary answers. God bless. Have a blessed Sabbath day and talk to you soon. God bless po. Maraming salamat. Blessed Sabbath day.